What caused you to stop trading on the floor?
I enjoyed my time on the exchange board, and actually, I was vice chairman with Harry Falk, and Harry was a great mentor. As the exchanges were changing, and what I mean by changing, the term back in the early 2000s were monetizing. Exchanges were monetizing themselves. There was pressure at our exchange. We had at the time it was coffee, sugar, and coke. Coffee and sugar exchange was probably lasted until the early '80s, and then coffee and sugar merged with cocoa, and then I'm thinking it might have been in the early '90s or mid '90s. Coffee and sugar merged with cotton, and then the coffee, sugar, and cocoa exchange with cotton became the New York Board of Trade. And then when we were all together as the NYBOT, there was pressure to monetize. And so Harry and I switched roles. He became actually didn't switch roles, but he took on a new role as CEO or president. Actually, he was CEO of the exchange, and I became chairman. And so with the two of us, we started to explore, the monetization of coffee, sugar, cocoa, and cotton, the NYBOT. And we had a clearinghouse, which other exchanges did not necessarily have. Having gone to the Boca conferences, which is probably the first time that I met you, I was down at the Boca Raton conferences. I got introduced to Jeff Sprecher, really enjoyed him. Another engineer, by the way. Probably within in a couple of years, we spoke of merging the coffee, sugar, cocoa, cotton, NYBOT with the Intercontinental Exchange. In that merger document, there was a clause that if another exchange had listed our markets electronically, Intercontinental would begin to list our markets electronically. And that happened pretty quick, actually, shortly after the merger. After our merger, NYMEX listed our markets electronically, which kind of released ICE to be able to do the same. And we traded side by side for a little while, but shortly thereafter, all the markets went electronic. And that's really, to answer your question about when we stopped trading open outcry, that's really when that took place.
What is your worst memory of the floor?
The worst memories were really when I first started, when, it's just hard breaking in. It was hard breaking in. And it was unlike any other business when you think of it, where your competitors and people who you're trading with and against are within an arm's reach of you. It's not like they're in another city or in another building. You're right next to them. Those experiences, those interactions, particularly, like in the break-in period, were very, very difficult for me. And I struggled with that. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there were times when you would be trading and you would be on the wrong side of things. Something that I regret is that the yelling and screaming that you would do on the trading floor, sometimes I would take it home with me and feel like I had to compete in everything I did. Like, not only was I competing on the exchange floor, I was competing when I came home. And that took a while for me to break. I know that I think I'm so much different today and in the times off the floor. I'm a different person than I was during the times I was trading on the floor. And so that adjustment was not easy. And then looking back and realizing that I probably could have been more compassionate. I probably could have been maybe more understanding, empathetic, less competitive, might have benefited me as a human, not necessarily as a businessman, but as a human being.
What was your experience during September 11th?
We were actually speaking to Cantor Fitzgerald about the monetization of the exchange and potential mergers and so forth. So we had a meeting scheduled with Howard Lutnick, probably on the 40th floor or somewhere in one of the towers for lunch. So I was home that morning getting dressed when you know the when the planes hit, and so I wasn't there. And we had an office. Our company had an office in Long Island, and I was there when the towers fell. And I remember the emotions and the panic with people, and me included, trying to account for all our employees. And there was this one fella that stayed to the very end. People didn't know what was happening. You really didn't know what was happening, and you didn't. When the planes first hit, there was no conception that the two buildings would collapse as they did, and so it was a very strange time. And as I said, I almost feel guilty that I wasn't there to do something. But I guess thankfully, if those planes hit in the afternoon, I would have been in one of those towers. So I don't know why me, but I consider myself lucky for that meeting having been a lunch meeting instead of a breakfast meeting.
How did the backup trading facility come about?
As technology was evolving, John, we had Chief Operating Officer Pat Gambaro. I believe he was a CBOE broker at one time, and Pat came to us. He had a good background in technology. We began a technology committee, and having some engineering background, I was involved with that. And he talked about upgrading different programs that we had at the exchange that would help, not only clearing but order entry and so forth. And we began talking about building a backup site. So we built this backup site in Long Island City, as you mentioned, and it served a great purpose. And somewhat ironic was the fact that NYMEX had their building. They had moved out of the World Trade Center for 9/11, and they had moved into their building, which was down by the Hudson River there in Battery Park. The power grid was out, of course, in Lower Manhattan. As we were getting our feet back under us after the bombing, we had called NYMEX, Vinny Viola, and Mitchell Steinhaus, and I forget who else might have been involved in those discussions, but we told them that we would allow them to trade at Long Island City with us. And it wasn't big enough. It wasn't a big enough facility, but we were going to let them trade like before us in like pre-hours or after hours. And coincidentally, because they got their building back up pretty quick, they offered to have us do the same. So it was a really a good effort and gesture on both exchanges' parts to help out the other. That backup trading facility probably saved our markets. And I don't know what we would have done. I guess we would have tried to do some trading in London. I have no idea what would have happened to our markets if it wasn't for the vision of Pat and others to have that backup trading facility.